segment, Tom introduces a concept he developed selling books door to door, a concept called the buying line. Learn how to use this concept to know when it's time to close, and you'll find you'll soon be closing earlier, and more importantly, more often. Tom thinks it's time we all stop talking our way out of more sales. Then Tom goes even deeper into the concept of a planned presentation, and he gives you specific techniques to plan so that you don't sound canned, but instead your presentation can win you an Academy Award because you practiced it, you've made it your own, and you can adapt it to practically any sales situation. Tom then gets back into goal setting as it relates to the number of presentations you give, the second determinant of sales success. As a salesperson, Tom tells us that you can't control who buys, but you can get the law of averages working on your side and sell more simply by increasing the number of presentations you give. After all, as Tom says, if you see more, you'll sell more. Learn how to set your goals so that they no longer become a weight on your shoulders, and instead they become that dangling carrot in front of you that motivates rather than frustrates.
I want to introduce you to a concept I developed selling books door to door. An idea I found applies to every kind of selling. It's called the buying line. And here's what it looks like. This is the principle behind the buying line. After a certain amount of time during a sales presentation or several presentations, the prospect interest level rises to the level necessary to make a favorable buying decision. Or the interest level doesn't rise to the level necessary to make a favorable buying decision. In either case, the mythical line you're trying to reach as a salesperson is called the buying line. It seems logical that the shortest distance between two lines is the best. When you meet a prospect for the first time, you start two clocks. The time clock, how long you're with the prospect, and the interest clock, what the prospect's level of interest is in your product. In an ideal sales situation, as time goes by, the prospect's interest level rises and eventually reaches the level where the prospect's ready to buy. Of course, different prospects take different amounts of time to get to the buying line. Your goal should be to get to the buying line as quickly as possible, then close the sale. The best way to achieve this is by pre-planning your presentation. Shooting from the hip, ad-libbing, or using a completely different framework for your presentation is counterproductive to this goal. Every word you say in the presence of your prospect can and will be used against you. Therefore, every word that comes out of your mouth should help you get to the buying line as soon as possible. Anything you say that distracts from building customer interest or actually causes the customer to lose interest should be eliminated from your presentation. Giving a planned presentation can best accomplish this for you. Bob loved to tell his prospects jokes. He thought it loosened him up, made him laugh, showed him what a great guy he was. He also loved to throw these jokes into his presentation at different times as the mood struck him. His buying line looked like this. If he could have charted the effectiveness of his presentation in building customer interest to the buying line, he would have realized he was shooting himself in the foot. Sales presentations rely heavily on momentum, and anything that slows that momentum down or distracts from that momentum is counterproductive. Get momentum working for you, or it will end up working against you. I sound like a broken record or a CD, but the best protection against self-fired torpedoes is a planned sales talk. You can't accurately judge your performance if you give a fundamentally different presentation to each prospect. Make it your goal to head for the buying line in the most direct method possible. An insurance salesman showed up at the sales manager of a large drug company's door without an appointment. He asked to see Mr. Johnson, the sales manager, but Mr. Johnson's assistant refused, saying that her boss never sees salespeople without an appointment. The salesman, Ed, thanked her and said, "So that I might know where I'm going when I do have an appointment with Mr. Johnson, where is his office?" Mr. Johnson's assistant said, "It's on the second floor, but you need an appointment." Ed thanked her and promptly snuck up to the second floor, where he placed himself in Mr. Johnson's doorway and waited to be noticed. Mr. Johnson noticed him and said, "May I help you?" Ed said, "Yes, I'm selling insurance. You wouldn't want any, would you?" Mr. Johnson shot back, "No." Ed said, "I didn't think so." Then Ed continued, "If you did want some insurance, I guess you wouldn't want any for me, would you?" The sales manager was irritated and said, "Absolutely not. You're the worst salesman I've ever seen." Ed smiled and said, "I thought you'd feel that way." He turned slowly to go, and Mr. Johnson said, "Wait a minute, come back here. I'll buy a small policy from you if you'll let me give you a sales lesson." Ed humbly agreed, wrote up the policy, got a check, and sat down to listen to Mr. Johnson. The sales manager said, "Okay, first, you've got to get a sales talk." Ed replied, I got lots of sales talks. I got a whole drawer full of sales talks back in my office." Mr. Johnson replied, "Then why didn't you use one when you came here?" Ed smiled and said, "I did. That's the one I always use on sales managers." Ed used every principle discussed so far: clarity, brevity, momentum, and planning. Selling isn't simple. You don't make the big sales by being unprepared. They don't give Academy Awards to actors or actresses who don't know their lines. Longfellow said, "The heights by great men reached and kept were not attained by sudden flight, but they, while their companions slept, were toiling upward in the night." What goes into planning a sales presentation? Here are some recommendations. First, make it word for word. Write it out, lay it aside, and then reread it. Take out the superfluous material. Clarify the vagaries, then lay it aside again. Come back to it one more time, and then stop. 2, give it to your sales manager or another very successful salesperson in your organization. Let them read it and critique it, and then make changes. Next, record it. Listen to it with the script in front of you and edit it. Then listen to it again, only this time without the script in front of you. Just have a pad and a pen to make notes. Incorporate your notes into your final sales script. Now learn the script. Practice your script out loud in front of a mirror. Here's where we separate the women from the girls and the men from the boys, because frankly most of you won't go that far, but you should. Fred was failing at his job selling software to banks. I went to see him to put him on probation. I felt like it was hopeless, but I wanted to give him one last chance. I worked with him all day and watched 3 of his presentations. They were awful. That evening, between the end of the day and dinner, I had Fred give me his presentation over and over. And we worked after dinner up until midnight. I realized that night that Fred had been working for us for 4 months and never learned his presentation. The next year, Fred was our #1 salesperson. He's now a sales manager for another banking services company. You know what he makes every salesperson that works for him do? That's right, learn their presentations. Jim worked for me for 13 years. He made it to President's Club every year, an honor bestowed only on the top producers for every year. Every time I got in the car to ride with Jim, he'd say, "I want you to listen to my sales talk." You see, Jim was already successful. He knew what he was doing, but he realized that even with a planned presentation, things can creep into it or be left out. And if he wasn't diligent, he might mess up. Jim was a sales professional who drank the Kool-Aid and was successful. Number 5, keep it simple. Once you get your presentation where you want it, you must be diligent in your efforts to keep it pure. No new unnecessary material, no exclusion of significant details. In fact, when my salespeople hit slumps, after I've looked at the number of presentations they're giving weekly and determined whether that number has dropped, the second place I look is whether or not they've strayed from their sales presentation. If you work for a company that already has a planned script, good. Learn it in the same way. Practice it out loud, practice it with your spouse or a good friend. You know, only the good friends will understand that. Your relatives or by yourself. The point is to practice it. Ask yourself, am I saying anything that can be used against me? Think about when the president gives a speech. Someone writes it down word for word, the transcript's then handed out to the press, and then the president reads the speech. Why does this happen this way? One reason is so that he doesn't say something wrong that can be used against him. He always has his script to verify exactly what he said. As salespeople, we should be just as conscious of what we say to our prospects. Words can be misinterpreted and can cause a serious or even a fatal disconnect between you and your prospects. Let's say you proudly state to a new prospect, "We've developed a brand new technology." Well, as a salesperson, you're naturally excited because it's a new feature of your product. But the prospect may say to themselves, "New is dangerous and unproven." It's great and very important to believe in what you sell, but you must acknowledge and prepare for the fact that most prospects approach any sales situation with some degree of skepticism. Many approach it with a lot of skepticism. Remember that success in sales doesn't come from playing the good hands well. That's easy. It comes from playing the bad hands well. 6, develop an award-winning mentality toward planning. By now I hope you have, or at least have determined to have a sales presentation that could win you an Oscar. A presentation that could make the famous orator Cicero proud. A better planned presentation than Aristotle himself could have written. Williams Jennings Bryan was one of America's greatest orators. Aspire to be better than he was. Think big. I've covered the first two foundations for a great presentation: a great attitude and a planned, practiced, and inspired presentation to give to prospects. The third foundation of a great presentation is goal setting and tracking. I briefly discussed goal setting as it relates to the number of people you see. Now I want to give it a full discussion to show its importance throughout the entire sales process, from planning to execution and through to follow-up. You need goals in at least two areas: activity and results. You should have both a high and a low goal. Your goals must be written down, have a specific time frame, and then be communicated to someone who's important to you. Let's go through this step by step. First, you need activity goals. Let's say you want to track your activity in the area of approaches. A lot of salespeople use the phone for the first approach, but if you cold call or use email, it doesn't matter. You should still set a goal for this activity. Most salespeople should set activity goals in three areas of the approach: basic, approaches by phone, email, approaches in person. The second activity salespeople engage in is initial presentations or visits. Setting an activity goal here is both appropriate and crucial. Finally, most salespeople engage in follow-up visits or additional calls after the first meeting. It's important to set goals here as well. The second types of goals are results goals. Walt and Steve were two great salespeople in one of my sales organizations, and here's how they set their goals while selling products to bank. Walt and Steve both wanted to make $100,000 a year in commissions. This was their ultimate goal. For goal setting purposes, they both set their low goal at $100,000 and their high goal at $125,000. Walt knew that every time he sold to a bank, he earned an average of $4,000. Some sales had higher commissions than others, but his two-year average was $4,000 in commission for each sale he made. One day, Walt had lost some weight, and I asked him, "Are you on a diet?" Walt replied, "No, I'm on a commission." Walt's annual low goal for sales was 25 banks sold. 25 sales a year equaled $100,000 in commissions, and 31 sales equaled his high goal of $125,000. Keep them bite-sized, not supersized. Walt and Steve were good at breaking down the goal into smaller bites. After all, how do you eat an elephant? One bite at a time. Success by the inch, it's a cinch. By the yard, it's hard. A journey of 1,000 miles begins with but a single step. You get the idea. Walt set a monthly results goal of 2 banks per month for the first 11 months of the year, and then 3 banks in December. This equaled his low goal of 25 sales. His high goal was broken down as 6 months of 2 sales per month, and the remaining 6 months of the year at 3 sales per month. Walt went another step further. He wrote all his goals down and gave a copy to his manager, his wife, and the CEO of the company. Why? He wanted to put pressure on himself to perform, and boy, did he ever. Steve's plan looked the same, but his average sale resulted in a higher commission. He made $5,000 per sale in commissions the last 2 years. So he adjusted his goals appropriately. His sales looked more like 20 banks annually for his low goal and 25 banks annually for his high goal. He also included his mother on his distribution list of the written goals for a little added pressure. Some people don't set results goals monetarily, and that's fine. Salespeople set a goal to go on a winner's trip, be among the top 10 salespeople, or be number 1 in the company. These are all still results goals and require the same formula. The more specific you make your goals, the better they are. Dave Waddle was an American athlete competing in the 800-meter run in the Olympics. You may remember him, he ran with a baseball hat on. He set a stated goal to run the 800-meter race in a then world record time of 1 minute and 51 seconds. He did it exactly, but he only won the silver medal. A Swedish runner had set his goal to win the gold medal, and he did. Set specific goals to get exactly what you want. My third summer on the book field, selling books door to door, I decided I wanted to be the #1 salesperson. My sales manager encouraged me to do this, and I'm sure he and all the other 25 sales managers were encouraging their salespeople to do the same thing. Now, this fact didn't dawn on me at the time, but I realize now that everybody was being promoted to be #1. Before that summer started, I went through the following exercise, and let me tell you, it worked. I became the #1 salesperson in the company. The summer before, I had sold approximately 1,000 customers. After crunching some numbers, I determined that my average customer bought roughly $40 worth of books. I then factored in the fact that the #1 salesperson the previous summer sold about $45,000 worth of books. According to the numbers, to beat the top salesperson from the summer before, I was going to have to sell 125 more customers or raise my average sale to $45 per customer. I could have just worked 1.5 weeks more in the summer and got the same results because I was selling about 80 customers per week. However, I didn't want to get back to school late, so that wasn't an option. It's crucial to put it on paper just as I did and visualize the goals. You see, although I set the goal to be #1, a noble and ambitious goal, I had to follow the same results formula to get where I was going. Over the years as a sales manager, countless salespeople have told me their goal was to be #1, but those weren't real goals. They sounded great and resolute, but there was no planning or crystallization to make the goals happen. A man's reach should exceed his grasp, or what's a heaven for? I didn't set my goal to be #1 if my car didn't break down, because it did. I didn't set my goal to be #1 if I didn't get sick, because I did. I didn't set my goal to be #1 if I didn't run out of sales territory, because I did. I didn't set my goal to be #1 if my roommates didn't quit, because they quit. I set my goal to be #1 despite my circumstances. On the book field that summer, some days I was on track and other days sales were slow. This will happen to even the greatest of salespeople throughout their careers, and that's okay. The important thing to remember is that this will, in fact, happen. So don't stack your results goals. If you don't get the results you want one day, 1 week, or 1 month, don't stack up your shortfall. Goals are designed to help you, and stacking can create a millstone around your neck that'll sink you. Stacking goals never works. If you've set an annual goal and you see that you're far behind at 6 months into the year, just reset your goals. Trying to hit your initial goals become impossible, and your goals will become a whip, not a dangling carrot. On the other hand, if you've already hit your annual goal in 6 months, you should reset your goals higher. Smart companies recast their budget 6 months into the year, either raising or lowering their forecasts. That's all you're doing, recasting your goals for more motivation and mental crystallization. That summer that I was #1, I told my sales director about my goal, and he reminded me of it every week. I went on to sell 1,200 customers and sold my customers an average of $42 worth of book, and I broke the sales record. Your goals can be written down and broken down, but you cannot skip the important step of communicating your goals to someone important. You do this to keep you on the hook. That's why weddings are public, to keep you committed, or at least try to. Christians make a public profession of their faith to keep themselves held accountable. And you have to put yourself on the hook if you want to maximize your mind's ability to get off the hook by getting the results to which you've verbally committed. Who you share your results goal with is up to you. The point is to share them. You write your goals down not to stick it in a drawer, but to give yourself a visual image of what you want to achieve. The more often you look at these goals, the clearer their mental realization becomes. Goals are the initial push of the proverbial snowball down a hill that inevitably becomes an avalanche. Nothing on the face of the earth can stop it. Go through this goal-setting process and start your own personal avalanche. Setting goals is not enough. If it were, I could stop the goal-setting process right now and end this book. Once they're set, you must track them. I love legendary NBA basketball coach Pat Riley's book and the story of how he set a goal for each starter on the Lakers to be the best at their position. He posted the stats of the best player in the league at each position in the locker room, and then he compared his players' stats to those top players as benchmarks. This posting was public, posted for all to see. By the end of the season, he had the best player at every position, and they won the championship, his ultimate goal. That's a perfect example of setting specific goals and then tracking them each week. Not all of us will have a sales manager as great as Pat Riley, but we can track and measure our own results compared to both our activity goals and our results goal. A simple sales report. Most companies have a standard sales report form. The longer I train salespeople, the simpler I realize these reports should be. Here's what you should track each week: new activity, follow-up activity, and future activity. If you want to track daily activity, then just expand your report. By tracking this activity, you know where you stand each week, and activity is a precursor to results. Most results are measured in dollars. If you sell something that isn't measured in dollars, for example, if it's measured in units, then adjust the report from dollars to units to fit your company's tracking method. Again, it's simple to expand this to daily results. My first sales manager, Sam Johnson, said it's hard to win if you don't keep score. I say it's hard to score if you don't know the score. From time to time, I'll meet a salesperson who says, all my company ever wants me to do is fill out reports. I'm sure that's true sometimes. But the truth is, what could your company ask for that you aren't tracking yourself? The more you know about what you're doing, the more effective you'll be.